I'd now like to welcome Dr. Darren Sharp to the stage. He's a Senior Research Fellow at Monash Sustainable Development Institute, and he specialises in sustainability transitions research, particularly urban experimentation, grassroots innovation and the sharing economy. His work focuses on transition management, design for social innovation and community economies. He co-led the Livewell Yarra Urban Living Lab, which empowered local residents to reduce carbon emissions. His research emphasises social learning, institutional arrangements and urban transformations for sustainability. And he currently leads the Net Zero Precincts ARC linkage project, applying design anthropology to engage with precinct communities in an action-oriented study at the Monash Technology Precinct down in the Clayton campus. And that's exploring energy, mobility, buildings, governance and data. And Darren's a long-time collaborator and friend, and I'd like to welcome him to the stage. Thanks.
Thank you so much for that warm welcome, Declan. It's absolutely a pleasure to be with you all here today and this week. I really enjoyed the opportunity to visit Lithgow the other day and learning from the community leaders and some of the experiences there. I'd like to also begin today by acknowledging the Gadigal people and also thank the organising team, Declan, Stephen, Sally, Heather and everyone from ICS for putting this fabulous week together. I don't know how I feel about travelling on neoliberal airlines, Declan. I didn't actually pack a parachute. Did anyone else pack a parachute? I'm not sure. But that kind of got me thinking about Down to Earth and Latour talking about that Edgar Allan Poe story of descent into the maelstrom and the old sailor who gets shipwrecked and he sees the vortex opening up and imminent disaster ahead, which is very resonant with our present situation, and he finds a barrel to cling to. And so, it's an interesting thing to ponder in terms of which barrels should we cling to at the moment. And so hopefully today maybe we'll have some ideas. Over the whole week we've had lots of ideas about some barrels that we can cling to together and new barrels that we can build together. So today I'm really going to take you through our ARC linkage project, which Declan mentioned, on Net Zero Precincts, which is a 4-year project. We're about halfway through, and I'll give you a bit of an overview of the project and talk about some of our approaches, the interdisciplinary approach we're taking between transition management and design anthropology, some of our emerging findings, and the work that we're doing in the community within the Monash Technology Precinct. Before I do that, I think it's really important to just give a shout out to members of my team. We're a very close-knit team, been working on this for the last few years together. It's really across MSDI, myself and Rob Raven on the transition side, Sarah Pink and Emma Quilty at the Emerging Technologies Research Lab at Maldhan, who really bring rich ethnographic, anthropological experience, especially Sarah's work on design anthropology. And we're fortunate to also have Dion Tuckwell working with us, Sam Rye, and we've got 5 PhD students, Grace, Saba, Mariam, Mark and Yanda. So just to give context, the work that we're doing is really situated within the university's broader net zero ambitions. So the Net Zero Initiative was launched by Monash about 6 years ago, and Monash, for what it's worth, was the first Australian university to set a net zero target by 2030. That really is across a range of activities that you can see here, which will come as no surprise to you in terms of trying to electrify everything, trying to get off gas, introducing LEDs where we can, having renewable energy generation on site, which of course can't meet all our energy needs. So we also have a power purchase agreement with a renewable energy wind farm in regional Victoria as part of the Ngurra consortium. And then of course we're also doing offsetting. So it's imperfect, but we are on track. What was missing, I suppose, from this work and the roadmap was really research into how transitions are in the making and unfolding and emerging over this period, and how we can actually work with the really diverse mix of stakeholders in the Monash context to enable and support and strengthen the transitions that are underway, and to make it really relevant, meaningful, inclusive, participatory to those stakeholders and precinct community members. So there's a few maps that I'm going to be pointing to today. I think it's interesting to think about maps. We've struggled with this as a team. You can see here, this is a sort of, interesting map. There's not a lot of detail here, but it kind of gives you the context of the scale that we're talking about. If you've ever visited the Clayton campus, you'll know it's sort of like a mini city. And that green area there in the centre is where the university is based at Clayton. It's about 1.1 square kilometres, so it takes about 20 minutes to walk from Wellington Road in the south up to the north on Normanby Road to where CSIRO is based. So we essentially put together this bid for this ARC linkage, and we were fortunate enough to win the grant. We've got a really great mix of partners on board. We're essentially trying to develop an urban transitions framework that brings together transition management and design anthropology. Transition management is a process-based approach, if you're not familiar with it, that works with front runners to go through a process of social learning by doing, to understand from a systems point of view, the context within which this work is situated. So process of system and actor mapping, then undertaking visioning activities to imagine future changes, develop pathways, and then undertake experimentation as well. And it's been criticised somewhat for being fairly top-down, questions of legitimacy in terms of who are the front runners that are being selected, to what extent are you engaging with broader members of the community and civil society and residents and others and so on. And in order to address some of those gaps, we partnered with Sarah Pink and team to really bring in that rich anthropological expertise. And so Sarah and Emma's work has really enabled us to understand the complications and possibilities and contingencies of everyday life. And so we're trying to bring these two approaches together in a really novel project, developing this interdisciplinary methodology, which has been really exciting and fun, and also very challenging but rewarding at the same time. And the partners that you can see, we've got Engie, which is a big French energy utility, who's a main partner, the City of Monash, which is the local government in the area. They've also got their own 2025 zero carbon plan as well as a council. ICLEI, which is a global network of local governments for sustainability. So we're working with the Oceania office in Melbourne, with Steve Gawler, and so on, to really try and share the learnings from our work with local governments and city actors around the world, in the region and beyond. And then other partners include the City of Greater Dandenong, the Energy Efficiency Council, and so on. So today I want to give you a bit of an overview or an update on our Stage 1 report, which only came out a few months ago. And this is the product of over 50 interviews that Emma and I did over the course of last year. So I interviewed about 25 frontrunners, which were a variety of Monash staff and students, actors within local and state government that are busy and active in the precinct, SMEs, corporate actors, and others, social enterprise. Emma, I should say, then undertook about almost 30 actually walking interviews with Monash staff and students, visitors to the Clayton campus and the precinct, to really get a sense of how are they coming to and from the precinct, what are their routines, how are they using energy when they're coming to campus, how are they getting around, how are they thinking through questions of net zero, what does it mean to them from the experiences of everyday life. And so I'll spend the next few minutes going through some of the emerging findings that have come through that report, and talk to some of the, perhaps unsurprising to this group, grassroots innovations that we noticed in the work that we undertook over last year that often get overlooked when you're talking about major infrastructural transformations of this nature. So to kind of make a point about the kind of mapping work that's been done today, which is very much, that God's eye view from nowhere, where we tend to think of the precinct, in terms of, from a planning and control kind of perspective. We, through the course of last year, developed this experiential map of the precinct, really noticing a whole bunch of interesting work that's happening. And we're talking about this in terms of complications and possibilities here. So complications that sort of, potentially reveal tensions in terms of how transition management typically views these sorts of processes, but also trying to reframe how we can understand net zero transitions through the ethnographic evidence that we've been collecting and analysing, and then try and imagine new ways to envision and enact and experiment with net zero transition futures. And so through this work, we've identified and appreciated the community garden network which exists and the permaculture activity which exists across the university and adjacent to the university, often led by students and staff members as well. There's a huge amount of nature-based solutions. There's a reserve that Jock Marshall set up. If you've ever visited Clayton, there's actually this beautiful little area where you can go and hear the birds and see the birds and the wildlife and the ducks and the insects and the frogs and so on. There's a lake actually very close to MSDI. There's a reuse centre, which I'd learned about in the course of this research, where the university actually takes desks and chairs and monitors and other things and enables them to be refitted and repaired and then sold back often to students for a nominal fee to keep those useful goods in circulation and keep them out of landfill. And then there were interesting things that were observed around how, whilst major institutions are really pushing the shift to EVs and changing fleets and charging infrastructure and so on, the reality is that there's very limited charging infrastructure at the university and around the precinct. Very few people actually have the ability to afford EVs or drive EVs. And because it's a typical commuter campus and most people still drive to the university, although the suburban rail loop tells us that we will have a new station to Monash Clayton in 2035, and I'll be an old man by then. So, but that's good to know. There's been talk of a train station to Monash ever since the university was created about 60 years ago. But it's finally happening, which is good, apparently, hopefully, fingers crossed. But the reality is that most people still drive. And, it's all well and good to say, well, they should take public transport. And there is an impressive bus interchange on Wellington Road, but there's no direct train. And for a variety of reasons, post-COVID especially, we saw a real uptick in driving. And the reality is that, through our work, we've identified that driving is care work, that people actually drive to the campus, and that if, they essentially are doing that for convenience and safety, but also they are dropping their kids off at school. They're taking their kids to doctor's appointments. If they're students, they're sort of carpooling and they're going with a friend or two, as you can see from these sort of quotes here up on the slides. So they're carpooling, they're travelling together for safety, for convenience, and so on. So that really, speaking of complications, it complicates our assumptions about transitions in terms of, okay, we'll have a new train station over the next decade, and then everyone will take the train to the campus and so on, and we won't need to have half of the campus as a car park and so on, and and then others will drive EVs even though no one can afford them, and there's no charging infrastructure. So I guess I'm just pointing to the fact that it's complicated and it's not as straightforward as planners and as the messaging that we're getting from industry, from other actors, is as straightforward as it seems on the surface. The next topic I wanted to turn our attention to is the amazing work that's happening around the Indigenous design strategy that the university is leading on. So I've been talking to and working with a colleague, Matt Muir, in buildings and property, and I should say we're very fortunate to have an amazing facilities team at the university who've really been driving a lot of the net zero work that's underway. We've got now 5 all-electric buildings. We've got a really strong circular economy strategy and ESG strategy, really strong focus on reducing waste. various trials underway. And in terms of the Indigenous design strategy, Matt and his team within Buildings and Property are working through the planning to actually, as far as the net zero roadmap is concerned and the university's master plan is concerned, there's very strong work that's already been done to integrate native flora into the design and development of the landscape in the university to attract a whole variety of insects and birds and so on, and to really try and work with First Nations leaders. We have the William Cooper Institute at the university, so there's very strong engagement, and we're trying to really roll that out at Clayton as the main campus, but also to the other 3 domestic campuses in Melbourne, which are Caulfield, Parkville, and Peninsula as well. And we're fortunate to have an Aboriginal garden, which is a really great engagement and learning site right close to MSDI as well, where we spend a lot of time with our stakeholders too. So the next few slides I want to talk about reframing this notion of net zero innovation. And we often talk about innovation in terms of developing new technologies, new systems, but it's equally, if not more important, to recognise the role that improvisation, grassroots innovation, the activities of staff, students, community members, how important and significant that is, and to appreciate the work that's already underway. And through the Stage 1 report that I pointed to earlier, there's numerous examples, too many to mention here, but I wanted to spend the next few slides just going through some examples of grassroots, everyday innovations that we noticed in the course of doing the work, the field work last year. So this is a fabulous student-led project called Precious Plastic Monash, which is a circular economy initiative, and they are really using waste as I suppose, a social object to have a conversation around the circular economy, around transitions to sustainability. And they're doing fabulous work. They've got these shredder machines. They go out to schools. They bring in not just engineering students, but students from across faculties at the university to really build literacy, to raise awareness about the circular economy, and build capability in terms of getting young people to be aware of how they can potentially see a career or future opportunities in this space. And it's also, I think, encouraging the university to rethink its own actions around circular economy and waste streams and so on. So that's one example of grassroots innovations in terms of the circular economy. The next one I wanted to point to is the Community Gardens Network, which to an extent has sort of emerged spontaneously through the work of staff and students over decades. And so there is a permaculture group at the university. There's a Monash University community farm. So that's been a real joy to learn about that work that's going on the Clayton campus, around the student residences. Obviously there's been, there was a lull over COVID when there were too many shutdowns, lockdowns to remember. We're still getting over that in Melbourne. But that community garden network is beginning to be reactivated again. And a lot of this is led by student residents, I should say. We have about 5,000 students who live on campus at Clayton. And so it really does function as a small city. And so we're pointing to these examples to demonstrate how net zero transitions innovation is about much more than just the buildings and the energy infrastructure that we put in, and the importance of these sort of nature-based solutions and these grassroots innovations. The next one is another student project. This one is a group of really passionate students that we've been working with and talking to recently as well over the past 18 months or so. They were called Monash Solar Decathlon. Now they've changed their name to Net Zero Buildings. They come up with a whole bunch of different design ideas, which they go and pitch at this US competition every year, and they've won numerous awards. They're also trying to do prototyping on campus and on site to demonstrate how student expertise, innovation, creativity can play a role in thinking through these sort of this important work. And they've been part of our recent workshops, which I'll talk to next as well. All of these groups, the community gardeners, the circular economy folks, and the net zero buildings student teams have all been part of the work we've been doing to envision the future of the precinct. The last example I just briefly wanted to point to was this bicycle repair centre called Bargh, which is led by the Monash Student Association. And so there's a bicycle arrival centre on Normanby Road where you can have a shower, you can park your bike, and then there's this repair shop where you can actually get your bikes fixed, you can buy parts and equipment and so on as well. So whilst on an individual level these examples might seem small and potentially insignificant, I think what we can see if you look at the bigger picture is this sort of, meshwork emerging, these sort of little tiny nodes of transformation and change that if you connect them up, they actually amount to quite a bit. And so the work that we're doing is really trying to get us to reimagine, rethink what net zero transitions could and should look like in the context of a university precinct setting. And again, speaking of coming down to earth, we spent a lot of time thinking through in the planning of stage 2, which just wrapped up middle of the year, where we're envisioning the future of the precinct. So we just ran a number of workshops with about 60 stakeholders over the course of July and August at Monash Clayton. And I was actually very inspired, and thank you, Declan, for encouraging me to read Latour. We had a meeting about a year ago, almost to the day, and I bought a copy of Down to Earth and actually really informed my thinking in terms of how we designed these workshops. And so we developed this series of walking workshops, and we actually brought in our colleagues from the facilities team, from buildings and property. And we spent a whole day actually over a number of sessions walking through the Clayton campus and actually appreciating the nature-based solutions, the science lake, the circular economy activities that precious plastic are involved in, the solar panels that are on all the rooftops at the university, the all the food waste related activities that the campus centre are involved in, on and on. So I think until you can kind of actually, experience what is actually happening on the ground in terms of transitions in the making, and appreciate the nature that we have, that we're very fortunate to have at the university, hear the birds, smell the flowers, see all the irrigation that's been introduced, the amazing landscaping that we have, the incredible buildings that have been developed recently that are all electric, and then hear stories from people who live and work and visit the campus. That just really transformed people's perspective about transition. And we then worked with those stakeholders using this idea of living worlds. And you can see these terrariums here that we used. So we actually, on these walking tours, encouraged people to collect found objects, whether it was flowers, bark, people were collecting weeds, rubbish. We were talking about what do we need to kind of new things that we need to scale up and introduce, and other things that we need to phase out. And so we just had an amazing experience with the community stakeholders, the precinct stakeholders, and then worked with them to support them to develop these visions of the future, which brought in found objects and created these living worlds. And we're now in the process of actually interpreting that work and then writing up the results of that. And then in stage 3, which is going to kick off next year, we're working with our 5 PhD students to then really activate the Clayton campus as an urban living lab and run experiments in net zero energy, mobility, built environment, governance and data with our partners and so on. So I'll end. I won't go through all the points here, but I guess I just wanted to make the point that in the work that we're doing, we're also inspired by this idea of, trying to avoid carbon tunnel vision, and which not an idea that myself and my team came up with. Konietzko came up with that, and it's a great idea, but it really speaks to what we're trying to undertake at the Clayton campus and the technology precinct, and to recognise the importance of waste in terms of net zero transition, recognise the importance of biodiversity, nature-based solutions, inclusion, just transitions. How do we participate with this really rich and diverse mix of stakeholders, and so on. And very happy to share details of the work going forward. And I'm really grateful to have the opportunity to speak with you all today, so thank you.